She has laid a foundation for our today's spiritual commitments. So we are now going to welcome our first panelist. We will keep it in the 5-minute range because of time. We welcome Catherine from UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center, and she will give us the depths and the context of what gender responsive monitoring framework is, how does it look like, is it inclusive at national level, international level, so that we can know how it is and how it looks like. Thank you. You are welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I think Tanya has made it really easy for me, so I'm just going to try to summarize why gender responsive monitoring framework is important. The outcome that we envision is that women's contributions to a healthy and sustainable environment are visible, and that the monitoring framework is a tool that can be used by parties to address those persistent gender biodiversity data gaps. That's what we want. So my friends and panelists are going to be unpacking some of the key messages, which are four. The first one is the monitoring framework includes gender-specific indicators for some targets and goals that relate to people. It will be important for parties to make use of those indicators in the relevant documents and for measuring progress towards the goals and targets. The second message is that we need data disaggregation. So perhaps the inclusion in the monitoring framework of an overarching principle on data disaggregation, including disaggregation by sex, it will be, and other characteristics, will be key to be able to provide analysis that address the gender biodiversity nexus, again, giving visibility to women and girls. The third is that, as Tanya was explaining, we have an ambitious gender plan of action that was adopted by parties. And the monitoring framework includes an indicator on the national implementation of the gender plan of action. But this indicator doesn't have a methodology. As we've heard from Tanya, this is a comprehensive and ambitious document that needs to be implemented, and we need a way to measure this. So Amelia is going to be telling us a little bit more about this. And the last point that I wanted to make is that we need to acknowledge that parties will need support to develop the capacities and their monitoring systems to be able to address those persistent gaps and to integrate gender considerations in their monitoring systems, because this is fairly new. There are amazing examples from Costa Rica, Mexico, Malawi, and others that I think other parties can learn from. So we do have some best practices. And with that, I think we can go with Amelia and Target 23.
Thank you so much. I think Amelia will just take up so that we continue with the discussion on how this framework can be gender sensitive. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you so much. Maybe I can just share quick remarks on this point. As the Women's Caucus, we have been highly advocating that the Target 23, as ambitious as it is, it needs a headline indicator that equals that ambition. That's why in this fora, and until we get a headline indicator, we will keep pushing for it, because it's the only measure that could actually make justice to women's and girls' contributions around the world, about all the roles, contributions, non-monetary, non-market-based, and that all of this caring work that they give every day to all the species, to the world, and to all of us. That's why we want to see that headline indicator that captures the ambition and the commitment that parties have already agreed to. That it's not nothing extra. It's just that they need to prove that they are delivering on the agreement that they already made. And I will just leave that message there so we hear from the other targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia, for that comment. Let us welcome Kalina from ICCA Consortium.
Buenas tardes a todos y todas. Muy agradecida de estar compartiendo aquí con mujeres tan poderosas y poder recoger las voces de las mujeres desde los territorios. Bueno, voy a empezar a presentar algunas recomendaciones sobre la meta 3, más conocida como la meta 30x30. Antes de empezar, quisiera mencionar un par de recomendaciones generales para la implementación del marco global de biodiversidad. Primero, señalar que cuando hablamos de género, debemos entender que nos referimos a todos los géneros existentes, como sea que se perciban en sus contextos culturales, y que existen conocimientos y prácticas únicos relacionados tanto a las mujeres como a los hombres y otros géneros. Por otro lado, relevar la importancia de abordar las relaciones de género desde un enfoque interseccional que considere múltiples desigualdades y las discriminaciones que enfrentan las mujeres por ser mujeres, por pertenecer a pueblos indígenas, a comunidades locales y también en muchos casos por ser de territorios rurales o incluso de territorios en conflicto. Ello para un monitoreo efectivo y pertinente de la implementación del marco global de biodiversidad. Resaltar también las contribuciones de las mujeres a la conservación de la biodiversidad, quienes a pesar de enfrentar condiciones extremas como desastres climáticos, sequías o lluvias extremas, siguen conservando sus territorios. Y también resaltar el importante rol que desarrollan en la gestión de los bienes comunes de forma sostenible, en la transmisión de los conocimientos tradicionales y en la defensa y gobernanza de sus territorios y en el cuidado comunitario, como bien dijo Amelia. Pese a ello, con frecuencia son excluidas de participar en espacios de decisión, mucho menos para liderar estos procesos vinculados a la conservación y a la protección de la biodiversidad. Dicho eso, ya vamos avanzando hacia recomendaciones específicas vinculadas sobre esta meta.
Perdóname, Cari, ¿puedo interpretar rápido?
Oh, no sé.
Para la gente que no está conectada.
Okay.
I'm just going to make a quick remark of what Karina has been saying, because we are providing interpretation through Zoom, but I see that most of you are not connected, so you cannot hear the interpretation. But she had some general remarks and recommendations towards what we should be speaking when we speak about gender. First of all, that we should recognize that most societies, particularly indigenous ones, have a broader view on gender. They don't have a binary view on gender, so we should recognize all identities. And above all, we should have an intersectional perspective on this regard, because women and other people face different inequalities based on other identity factors, such as race, ethnicity, age, or even the place they inhabit, and other inequalities if they are coming from rural or from remote areas. And also, she made a remark on the role of women and girls as caregivers and defenders, and regardless the big service they are providing, they do it despite big challenges and struggles.
Ok, gracias Amelia. Ya entrando a las recomendaciones específicas de la meta 3, señalar primero que encontramos que la misma definición de los indicadores propuestos pueden ser un límite para monitorearlos desde un enfoque de género. Esto porque son principalmente cuantitativos, vinculados al porcentaje de las áreas que se buscan proteger, o son indicadores binarios referidos solo un par de ellos a la gestión de dichas áreas, y debería profundizarse en más indicadores cualitativos que nos brinden información, por ejemplo, sobre cómo las mujeres vienen conservando estas áreas.
Her first proposal is that, or her first point regarding indicators for Target 23 is that they themselves are limitative, because they are quantitative and they don't allow the disaggregation, or they don't allow how to measure which are the proposals, the contributions from women. So she is asking to have qualitative indicators that allow for this disaggregation. And also because the binary indicators are also only focusing on management, or so that doesn't allow to understand women's participation.
Faltan también más indicadores vinculados a género, por ejemplo, sobre las contribuciones específicas que realiza cada género a la conservación de esos espacios y también las brechas de participación de las mujeres en la gestión o gobernanza de los espacios que se buscan conservar, o también saber si se están asegurando los derechos de quienes están conservando estos espacios, como por ejemplo las mujeres.
Second contribution is that there is a need on more indicators on gender that measure women's contributions and the level and quality of their participation in governance schemes and if their rights are secured or guaranteed.
Por otro lado, también se establece un porcentaje para alcanzarlo como meta, ¿no? Pero creo que lo que debemos concentrarnos es en proteger la biodiversidad que existe en un territorio integral, porque por la importancia que tiene la relación con los territorios para los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales y para que no se fragmenten los territorios, que podría producir mayores impactos a las comunidades locales y pueblos indígenas, principalmente las mujeres también, ¿no? En este caso.
Also, because she remarks that the percentage element of the target is quite problematic because it only focuses on to conserve just a part of the territory, and it's not looking at it as a whole. That is their approach and their proposal to look it from an integral approach.
Y se debe avanzar también en construir indicadores culturales porque para los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales el conservar y cuidar sus territorios está directamente ligado a su cosmovisión y espiritualidad. Es lo que sustenta la importancia de la defensa de sus territorios y es lo que da fuerza a las mujeres a defender sus territorios, sus espacios costeros y la biodiversidad.
There also should be cultural indicators that measure and takes into account IPLC proposed ways of looking into territory, their views, their cosmovision, and their lifestyles that are highly linked to their territories.
Se debe incluir también como indicador específico a monitorear los territorios conservados y gestionados por pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, incluyendo la elaboración de informes que señalen el porcentaje de estos territorios que son conservados por pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, y también el reconocimiento y protección legal que reciben estos territorios, y también las formas o los sistemas de gobernanza empleados para conservar estos espacios.
Next proposal is to have an indicator that measures how many territories are conserved and managed by IPLCs, and also to secure the recognition and legal protection of those.
No existe tampoco información a nivel territorial con datos segregados por género y etnicidad a nivel país que permitan establecer indicadores para los planes de acción nacional. Sin estos datos no se pueden construir líneas de base a partir de las cuales iniciar el monitoreo de la implementación del marco global de biodiversidad. Hay que empezar desde abajo hacia arriba y en eso estamos muy atrasados.
There's no information at national level disaggregated by gender and ethnicity regarding how territories are being managed, and though that information is needed to generate action plans at national level. We need to come from bottom to top.
Por último, igual de importante es asegurar recursos y mecanismos de financiamiento que se distribuyan de forma equitativa y con enfoque de género, considerando las brechas y las desigualdades que afrontan las mujeres para acceder a recursos y buscando aportar no solo alcanzar el porcentaje establecido, sino a mejorar la gestión y la gobernanza de estos espacios con una participación activa de las mujeres, y también asegurar recursos que apoyen a las mujeres en las labores de monitoreo que vienen realizando desde hace muchos años sin ningún apoyo técnico ni apoyo financiero. Muchas gracias.
Last point made is there's a urgent need to redistribute resources in an equitable and gender-responsive manner, not only to reach the percentage in the target, but to improve the governance and the management with an emphasis on women that have been providing their contributions without technical or financial support.
Muchas gracias, Karina. I think what we are hearing is the need to just have indicators that are concrete in the framework. Our next speaker is Jacqueline Rukanda from the Natural Justice, who is going to take us through Target 13. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, everyone, for coming to this meeting. I think most of the points that are important for Target 13 have already been canvassed in the proposals that we've just had, because if you look at Target 13, it talks about fair and equitable sharing of benefits. But before we can reach to the fair and equitable part, we need also to talk about access, about the availability of resources for women in the aspect of ABS. As Natural Justice, we have done quite some substantive work with several communities regarding access and benefit sharing. And in South Africa, we have seen many gains. So my intervention would be a practical one based on the observations that I have made with several communities that we work with. If you look at communities, there are 3 communities that I've worked with, the Khoi and the San, who are in the West Coast, the Venda, who are in Limpopo, as well as some communities who are in Namibia, called a community called the Kwe. And these have been dealing with genetic species that are unique to their cultures. And you find that in the aspect of benefit sharing, or in the aspect of traditional knowledge, mostly women, because of their historical role of playing the role of nurturer and carer of the family, as well as playing the role of informal medicinal and traditional knowledge holders, many women are found in the space of access and benefit sharing. But the result of it, when we work with communities, you find that women are at the bottom of the value chain in as far as getting actual monetary and non-monetary benefits from the traditional knowledge that they have, although they are the custodians under the customary practices of this traditional knowledge related to genetic species. So I will speak practically about a young lady that I met 2 months ago. Her name is Kim. She is running a nursery on this genetic species called the honeybush. It's a specialty for the Khoi and the San. And she has started a nursery that she is looking after the plant, and then the industry that is involved in the manufacturing, processing, and then eventually marketing of the tea is called the honeybush industry. But there are great needs for Kim. The first need for Kim is that she needs to have training, right? To be trained to have business acumen, to turn her nursery into a business, so that she can move up from the value chain from just being a harvester and a carer of the nursery, but to also running an enterprise as a business. So when we talk about the implementation of Target 13 and what ways we can effectively measure states' progress to implementing that, we are looking at financial support for Kim, right? So that she can grow her business. We're looking at training. We're looking at indicators that want to demonstrate that on the ground, she is receiving training so that she can understand the business entity, she can understand running her own business, she can access a mentor, someone who has done this work and can help her grow that work. We are looking at connecting her also with other youths, because what is happening in the traditional knowledge space, the traditional knowledge is dying down because many young people are not seeing the value of having this traditional knowledge and passing it down for the present, even for future generations. So we are looking at support, both social, economic, and political support from states, so that they can preserve this traditional knowledge of how to nurture a plant such as honeybush, and then how, after preservation, it can then be passed on to the coming generations for other young women to want to take up this space, to want to grow businesses. Because you see, in the contemporary society that we have, many people are turning to contemporary education. No one wants to pay attention to traditional knowledge, because at the end of the day, they ask themselves, what do I have to benefit by having this? So we want to see governments recognizing that traditional knowledge is a way for communities to build up their livelihoods, particularly for women, because most of the knowledge is under the custodianship of women. And in cultures, it is passed down from the matriarchal women who are older to the younger women. So we want to see the value of that knowledge and the value of that transition actually realizing benefits for women on the ground. So when we talk about indicators, I would like to point out some needs, specific needs that speak to the work of traditional knowledge holders, specific needs that speak, indicators that speak to the power dynamics. When we say fair and equitable sharing, we are talking about fair and equitable between the sexes in all their in all the characters that they come. We're talking about fair and equitable in between the communities themselves. Women, youth are always at the bottom of the value chain in decision making, in taking decisions for what this knowledge can actually do for them. And when we say fair and equitable sharing, we're also talking about the power dynamic between third parties who come to use this traditional knowledge so that then they can pay a benefit to the communities for. We are also talking about a power dynamic between states as implementers of the GBF and the communities. We are talking also about a power dynamic between representatives who come into the communities to try and assist women and youth to use this traditional knowledge that they have. So all these power dynamics, all these dynamics within a cultural society, we need specific indicators that will measure progress in changing the historical marginalization and bringing it up to a level where we can say, target 13, we now have fair and equitable sharing of access. Of benefits. And then access is important in the sense that as women who are frontline defenders of their environment, there is the dynamic about the protection of human rights, which comes under target 22 and target 23. And if we have indicators that are, binary and request an answer of a yes or a no, that means nothing for Kim, because Kim faces real dangers, right? When she speaks to people who are bringing in threats to her environment. So we need indicators that actually make it a transformative GBF, because already we have a normative human rights instruments that have existed before time. But the problem with implementation is that there is lack of political will, there is impunity when it comes to violations against human rights defenders and against environmental rights defenders. So we want indicators that can actually show a progressive implementation that bridges that gap between what has gone wrong when we have such a normative human rights framework, and now in the space of biodiversity protection, in the space of access and benefit sharing, what measures are being put to look at the specific challenges that women face as environmental defenders because of their gender, not necessarily as a community, but because of their gender. Understanding that their role has always been suppressed even within the family unit. So those are some of the needs that I am thinking of and that I would like to highlight, so that when indicators are being crafted, these practical examples are kept in mind, because a yes and no means nothing for someone who is suffering intergenerational and historical marginalization. We are looking also it's efforts to preserve traditional knowledge so that it makes sense for people to get both monetary and non-monetary benefits from their biodiversity.
Thank you, Jackie. Wow, that was rich. Thank you for the story of Kim. There are many Kims around the world that are still fighting for equitable and access benefit in everything they are doing, so that every decision and everything that is done is inclusive. She introduced to us to capacitate Kim and other Kims around the world, and it brought us to Taji 22, where I'm going to welcome Abigail from Tebtebba Foundation, member of International Indigenous Group, who is going also to tell us how gender equality can be measured or should be measured, especially in monitoring framework on target 22. Welcome, Abigail.
Salidu my DY.
That's a chant or a song that old ladies usually sing, not in my community, but in a neighboring community. And I think it's really nice to share with you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. So on target 22, it's the speakers before me gave really good points already. So I hope I'm adding more to that. So for target 22 and even 23, these are very important because they operationalize the whole of society approach and they are cross-cutting. And I think these alone make it important that we give due focus, attention, detail, and nuance to these targets. So back at home in the Philippines, when we are discussing like the NBISA process, they show us like where they plan, what they plan to do to achieve target 3. And we see like the coverage of the additional protected areas. When they show us the map, we see that it will touch on like ancestral waters, because I'm from the Philippines and we have a lot of marine protected areas. And so we say you really cannot achieve that without indigenous peoples and local communities, because it's gonna touch on our ancestral waters. And therefore its implementation is not meaningful if target 22 is not the indicators are not meaningful. And the same as well for example, those related to sustainable agriculture and plant conservation, which is one of the agenda in this meeting. Care work is often the responsibility of women, ensuring there's food and for not only for the family but also for the community, ensuring that native seeds for food is still available for the next planting season, making sure there's enough bark for making clothes or plants for dyes. So you cannot achieve these two as well if we don't if we don't have a meaningful implementation of target 23. And so our discussions right now in this meeting, I think the binary indicators I see them as like enabling conditions, so that headline indicators for this, which are more outcome and substantive, can happen and can be more meaningful. And definitely they should complement and not replace headline indicators in this aspect. So when we were discussing last night in the contact group on like target 22 and some of the binary questions there, we felt like the whole set of binary questions, in not only the legal policy, the operational mechanisms, but also like capacity building, financial resources monitoring, we feel these elements are also very important, because we've heard from some parties already like that they need capacity building. So we can capacitate each other, not only us, indigenous peoples, women, youth, but we can also capacitate government on aspects on human rights-based approach to the KM-GBF. And when we capacitate each other, this would facilitate more mainstreaming across government and across whole of society. So a while ago, we've heard there were best practices by certain countries. I think these binary questions would actually allow countries to reflect existing efforts they already have that just needs to be synergized, and that could contribute to the KM-GBF. And that's why I think we should really look into those. So of course, I see the binary indicators for target 22 as rather than duplication, they're complementary. But of course, yes and no, mentioned a while ago already, it's not enough. We need actual resorts. So we need more people equitably participating. For us indigenous peoples and local communities, we need to be able to protect our territories for unsustainable land and unsustainable land and marine use change, and we need to be able to practice our customary sustainable uses. So we still really push for the importance of a headline substantive participation indicator with disaggregation definitely by age, by gender, by ethnicity, and the recognition of our indigenous territories, which I think is not, it's not even like a gold standard. It's a threshold, because it's the starting point for us to be able to practice what we have. It supports what we have already been doing for a very long time. And yeah, I think that's all for me. Thank you. Thank you so much, Abigail. We have had so much from our panelists, and now it's time to just bring it back to the audience. Perhaps if someone has a question to any of the speakers. Yes, kindly switch on your mic.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for all the contributions. Extremely rich. I'm Maurizio with the Forest Peoples Program, but actually here I'm reflecting a bit as a member of the ARTEG on indicators and on how to bring all of your contributions, which are extremely relevant, into the work of the ARTEG and then into SAPSA 26 next year. In the ARTEG itself, there has been some effort to look at disaggregation of the headline indicators, those that have been adopted by IPLCs and by gender. However, because there were so many questions that the ARTEG had to address for each of the headline indicators, there wasn't really sufficient time or expertise really in the room to bring together concrete proposals on how the various headline indicators can be disaggregated by gender. So if you look at the ARTEG meeting report from Montreal 2 weeks ago, which was published just a few days ago, they identified, let me get it, so basically the ARTEG identified up to 6 headline indicators for which the information could potentially be disaggregated by gender. And those are B1, 9.1, C1, C2, 10.1, 12.1, and 15.1. This came from kind of initial brainstorming of this. But what you propose here, for example, looking at the discussion on target 3 and 13, those, for example, were not identified as headline indicators for which a disaggregation, is highly relevant or is possible. So that's where your expertise, here and your experiences are so important. It's really important to put them, I don't know, through the online forum, or there must be a way to bring your expertise into the work of the ARTEG, both in terms of identifying the gaps and also in proposing concrete disaggregation questions that can be addressed under each headline indicators. So perhaps one of the exercises that could be done is to look at the metadata sheets that are available. Is linked to the UNEP-WCMC's website. So there is a website with all the metadata sheets for all of the headline indicators, and really see what is already there and how, as a collective group, you can input into those metadata sheets, because that's eventually what will be the main outcome of the ARTEG into a SAPSA 26. That's what is aggregation. Then on the key issue of the very big gap of not having headline indicators for target 23 and target 22, I mean, you have seen the last night and also this morning in the contact group that there are different opinions by parties. I think it's extremely important to keep pushing on this issue. There is now an agreement that time permitting, the ARTEG will start looking at that gap and provide some suggestions for further work. It might not be adopted by COP16, but there could be further work being done on developing headline indicators for those targets that don't have headline indicators, maybe just post COP16. I think it's an extremely important aspect, as Abby was saying, target 22 and 23 are the key targets for achieving a whole of society approach. If those two targets are not fully implemented, I think we will come to 2029 with, again, saying that, you know, we are not achieving what we are set to achieve here. So they are extremely important. I fully support your advocacy for getting the head-on indicators for those two targets. Thank you.
Does someone from the panelists want to add something on what he had said?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mauricio. And we understand that the method, it will also depend on the methodology of those headline indicators that are being proposed to see if it's possible to include a disaggregation. And I know that obviously many of the SDGs that relate to people, they should include that disaggregation. But it's also what countries are thinking about their own national indicators that they want to use to monitor progress towards the relevant targets. So I know that there's it's a big monitoring framework with different types of indicators, and that the proposal is especially for the use of headline and binary indicators as key measures. But I'm sure countries will also use their own national indicators. And you know, if there's interest from countries on building their capacities to develop further qualitative or quantitative indicators that make sense to them, then there's a number of initiatives that will focus in on that, on monitoring systems, and UNEP-WCMC will be happy to support with that. And I also wanted to highlight that in collaboration with Swedbio, CBD Women Caucus, and UNEP-WCMC, we're looking at the development of a methodology for the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action, and we'll make sure to provide those inputs to the ATEC on time for consideration before SAPSTA 26. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is someone else, we can take one more question.
Hello, good day. Thank you very much to all panelists. I'm Candice Amoroso from Trinidad and Tobago. I know we're talking about, to responsibly monitor the implementation of the gender targets in the Montreal Convent Montreal GBF. But can you, the panelists, give me one concrete action that you think that countries and parties like myself, my country, Trinidad and Tobago, can implement actually to ensure that women and girls actually have, equal access to achieving the three objectives of the convention. My country, well, women actually are, I would say that they actually are improving status. They have equal access to lands and to resources. So I want to know, like, what can we do, to actually ensure that we achieve this target? Thank you. If we can get examples, concrete examples that you have implemented there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can have a go, and then my colleagues can chip in. I think the most important thing would be to implement the Gender Plan of Action, because it has a number of actions that address the key outcomes that relate to the three objectives of the convention. So that will be the first thing. And if you're interested, it would be great to collaborate for you in your country to test this methodology that is being developed by UNEP-WCMC, CBD Women Caucus, and Swedbio, that will help to monitor progress towards the implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. So, if you're keen to test this methodology, we can collaborate on that. And I don't know if there are other inputs from the floor.
If I can, I also would like to add, because before you ask for a concrete, you put the example of the land. I was going to say that if we need a measure of our target 23, is the Gender Plan of Action, but within the Gender Plan of Action, the access, as you said, to land, not recognizing when women have their right to land recognized, that means a lot. And coming from the context of Mexico, that means that they have an identity document, that they have a proper a title property. No, and for women to have that, at least in my country, is a big step, because you don't have money, because you don't have like, even within the community, within the families, there are gender norms that prevents you to earn, to inherit, to manage, to make decisions. So, and that's why we disagree with the binary indicator, because having the law there that says that we can have that access to those lands, because Mexico, we have those, but do that happen in reality? Not necessarily. We have the framework, we have the law, we have policies, but it's a bit like we have been saying here. We need to ensure, and it comes something with into the long term, like to transform those gender norms. When women are equally recognized as capable to manage, to make decisions, and because of these caring roles, I could say that the decisions that we made are better for the world, for our community, because we are coming from this perspective that is not our nature. It has been a gender, a role assigned to us, but we have that mindset. We have that view of the world, of taking care. So if we are able to make the decisions on the land, then that could lead us to a change. And there are a couple of examples, but it's not the norm. No, it's not the big examples that this happened.
Yo también quisiera agregar que si hay una medida que es fundamental, creo yo, más allá de abordar los planes de acción nacionales y también las estrategias nacionales, los países que no lo tienen, o la actualización de esas estrategias nacionales, creo que lo fundamental es asegurar la participación de las mujeres en la elaboración de estos planes, estrategias o actualización. Creo que partiendo de ahí estamos empezando bien, porque si no va a seguir como reproduciéndose documentos elaborados por hombres principalmente, o la mayoría hombres, por instituciones que están todo el tiempo relacionados a estos temas y no recogen las voces de las mujeres que están en los territorios, protegiendo desde hace muchos años sus territorios y la biodiversidad.
I can translate. She's saying that the key thing will be to ensure the participation of women from diverse groups of women to contribute towards the development of the strategies, for example, MBSAPs and national reports, and committees that are set up to implement the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, because they will bring their voices, and that will make it gender responsiveness.
Y saliéndome del tema, pero quería referirme a los datos desagregados. Si no tenemos datos desagregados por país, estamos dejando a muchas mujeres atrás. Y eso pasa, por ejemplo, el gobierno de Chile reporta los ODS, pero da un dato general sobre mujeres. Pero ¿cómo está la educación de las mujeres indígenas, de las mujeres afrodescendientes, o también cómo están en territorios rurales? Entonces, la idea es avanzar con todas las mujeres de la mano.
And she also made a point about data disaggregation. She was giving an example of a country that doesn't disaggregates by gender, but not by, for example, ethnicity or population group, that makes it specific to the challenges that are faced by different groups of women. And I think we had enough of Q&A, and should we go to the closing remarks? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the questions and the answers from our panelists. I think everything that has a beginning has an end. So without further much ado, we will welcome our last speaker to give us the closing statement. Welcome, Ruth Spencer, who is the advisory board, sits in the advisory board for the Women's Caucus.
We have heard from an amazing group of women working in different countries, in different areas, some with international organizations like WCMC, UNEP, and at community level. And I'm telling you, we women, we are bold and we have that determination in us. And it's that passion and ambition that pushes us to go to do the impossible. Once we see there's a route, something to be done, we go across borders to get it done. That's the kind of passion we have in us. And it was brought out for the whole of society, whole of government. We have to build those partnerships and collaboration. We can no longer be just CSOs working among ourselves. We have to build those partnerships with government because government need capacities to be built. I see a lot of that in my country. I see my sister from Trinidad, glad to have you here. But in the smaller islands, you have to take on new roles and responsibilities. You see there are lacks. You see there are gaps in government departments. Try and fill them. They don't know the communities that we are working with. They don't go there. But to get those NBSAPs, we have to organize events and ask them, the government, please come and join us. Come and see what they're doing. Come and hear their voices. And it's very important going forward that we really build and strengthen these bonds and relationships. So thank you. And we have to continue to support each other. And we thank Amelia and the other members of the Women's Caucus for the great work that they're doing. When I see Amelia all hours of the morning up sending out emails, sending out documents, I said, really, this is more than a 24-hour day. I don't know how she manages. And that data that is needed, we have to get that data. The government is not going down to the communities to get that data. We who work with the groups have to get it. We have to tell their stories. It's so very important because if we don't do it, the groups will remain invisible, unnoticed. And the important work that they're doing at the community level, we have to showcase it to the world. And once you start to do that, those groups are going to be very empowered. You just, bring out their stories. You're going to see changes taking place within those communities. And the power is in the people. So let's build the capabilities of the groups we work with the people. And I want when 2020, 2030 comes, all of our countries will have wonderful reports. That's what we want. Inclusion and participation is very important. So we thank you all for coming and continue to work and support us. Continue donors to channel resources down to us so that we can do more for the groups. We have a lot of pilot projects. We want to upscale them. There's so much to be done and we welcome your support. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.